Press record. There we go. So welcome, everybody, and good morning. Delighted to have you here for another presentation of the Illinois Digital Equity Capacity Grant webinar series, brought to you by the Illinois Office of Broadband, the Illinois Broadband Lab, and with the cooperation of University of Illinois Extension. My name is Mike Delaney. I will be providing the technical support today, and I'd like to welcome Devin Brownstein, who is the head of the Illinois Office of Broadband, and will be your moderator for today. Devin, take it away.
Wonderful. Welcome, everyone. My name is Devin Bronstein. I lead the Illinois Office of Broadband at the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. We are very excited today to be running through an official technical assistance session for our brand new Notice of Funding opportunity called the Illinois Digital Equity Capacity Grant, or IDEC. So I think we can go ahead and get started. Next slide. All right. So we'll start with some context on what is the Digital Equity Act, which is the funding source behind this exciting program. Then I'll give a breakdown of the NOFO, so share the different sections, walk through some important details, dates, etc. And then I'll hand it over to Amber to go through GATA pre-qualification and some important things that applicants will need to know as it relates to qualifying for a Illinois state grant. And then we will leave as much time as we can for Q&A. Note that all of our questions and answered in these webinars are documented on a public Q&A document. So if you have to leave early or if you miss out, don't worry, you will be able to reference those after the fact. Objectives for today. We hope that you will learn about key IDEC NOFO pieces of information, including timelines, funded project types, eligible entities, and other components. You'll learn how to pre-qualify as a prospective grantee, and then you will glean some tips for effectively applying for the grant. So we'll start with a little bit of context. Who is the Illinois Office of Broadband team? So hopefully we've interacted with many of you in our various capacities. But the mission of the Illinois Office of Broadband is to achieve universal connectivity across our state of Illinois. So the broader Illinois Broadband team is made up of two entities, the Illinois Office of Broadband and the Illinois Broadband Lab. So I sit in the Illinois Office of Broadband. We are a part of the state agency DCEO, and we're responsible for carrying out now over $1 billion in grant funding to help connect every last household to quality, affordable broadband internet, as well as the skills, tools, confidence, support that they need to actually use that internet to thrive, meet their full potential, and participate in Illinois' modern economy. So you may have interacted with several folks on our team. We have folks that focus on grants, compliance, community engagement, and most recently policy. And we have our hugely important sister agency over at the University of Illinois called the Illinois Broadband Lab. So the lab builds capacity in mapping, in data, community engagement, program development, and lots more. So you can see some of our faces up here on the right side. First, I'm sure if you're in this room, you're probably relatively familiar with what we mean when we talk about digital equity and inclusion. So just a quick recap. When we talk about digital equity, it's really the state that we're trying to reach, where individuals and communities have the information technology capacity that they need for full participation in the society and economy of the US and here in Illinois. And digital inclusion is the work. It's the day-to-day activities that get us to the state of digital equity. So this includes working with individuals to make sure that they have access to and skills to use broadband, devices, digital skills training, tech support, cybersecurity, and so much more. So when we think about digital equity, it's really just a means to an end. Having digital skills unlocks all of the different components of our modern economy in so many different facets of life and industries, as you can see on this slide. So I'm sure everyone here has an example that comes to mind, whether it's education, enabling learning from home, or doing your homework, registering for classes. All of these things require a quality internet connection, a computer, and an understanding of how to navigate software and the internet to do these tasks. Healthcare is huge, whether it's seeing a doctor over telehealth, logging on online to interact with your insurance company, see test results, communicate with a doctor. Digital equity enables these really essential skills. There's also tie-ins to agriculture, industry, business, workforce, and just joy in life. So much more. All right. So the grant program that we'll be talking about today is a part of our broader implementation of the state digital equity plan. So this is a plan that Illinois published, I think over a year ago now. It was approved by the federal government, and it essentially lays out a roadmap from now until 2030 for how we will achieve digital equity, whether that's connecting every last household, business, and community anchor institution to quality, affordable broadband, or building those skills and support systems around the state to achieve these goals. So we'll either put a link in the chat now or make sure that you all are connected to this plan after the fact. But everything that we'll be talking about today is rooted in this plan and how we can implement the plan and further these goals with your help. So part of the plan involves funding. We were awarded $23.7 million to implement the digital equity plan and achieve all of these ambitious goals. This funding is one of three tranches of funding. And after that third tranche, we do expect to receive about $30 million total to achieve this plan. And what you see here is a diagram that breaks down the core activities that we committed to achieving these goals through. And so what we'll focus on today is this category of the Digital Equity Grant Program. So a year plus ago, we said when we get this funding, we are going to create and launch a digital equity grant program to get these funds into communities so folks who are already trusted and knowledgeable can do this work on the ground. And now we officially have that funding. And so this is what we're here to do. And we're so excited. And another element of this process that I'm also really excited to highlight is we did not create this grant program alone. We did not create this grant program behind closed doors with, a bunch of bureaucrats. We went out into communities to understand what do you need and what should this grant program look like based on your perspectives and experiences. So between last May and July, we had a series of workshops that spoke to folks on the ground, whether they were service providers or they were receiving digital equity services themselves. And we had folks weigh in on things like program categories and areas of focus. How should we evaluate applications? What sort of metrics can be used to measure impact? What should we look at when we're evaluating a budget? And how can we build awareness of these grant programs? So this idea of equity in process means that throughout our entire multi-year implementation of the grant program, we will be working hand in hand with you to co-create these programs, get feedback, learn, integrate that feedback to make sure that the services that are being provided are actually meeting the needs of communities on the ground. So an exciting input into this NOFO that the plan is to continue throughout the next several years. All right. So that was some background on the funding source, the Digital Equity Act, and the plan that this grant is rooted in and was born out of. So now we will go into some details about the actual grant. The first thing I wanted to frame on is this concept of a NOFO. So if you've applied for a state grant before, this might be review for you. But I know that there are lots of terms that are, pop up here and there when you're applying for state funding. So important to kind of get familiar with what all of these terms and acronyms mean. So a NOFO stands for a Notice of Funding Opportunity, and it's essentially a document that outlines the rules of the road for this grant program. So what is the purpose of this grant? Where did the funding come from? Who can apply? What timelines should folks keep in mind? how much can we award in terms of dollar amounts, other requirements, and other instructions on how to apply. So picture this as your kind of guidebook, rules of the road for how to participate in the IDEC application process. Next, our timeline. So as I mentioned, we spent last kind of early spring or late spring, early summer, getting feedback from folks on what this grant program should look like. Following that time, we spent several months, both over the summer and this winter, hosting capacity building workshops with prospective applicants and folks who are either new to the space or looking to grow in the space. We know that building a program like this from scratch isn't easy. And so I'm hoping to connect folks to other organizations who have implemented these programs so we can all learn from each other and support you as you're building your applications. So those are ongoing, and I'll talk about them later in the presentation. But just to highlight a couple of key dates here. So the application officially opened on Monday, and then we have two important deadlines to highlight. The first is the final Wave 1 deadline, which is March 20th at 5 p.m. Central Time. So note, it is not a midnight deadline, it is 5 p.m. That's just a state requirement that we follow. But for folks who may want that initial check on their applications for completion, maybe this is your first state grant application or you've had some trouble in the past, we have an early review deadline. So if you submit your application materials by March 1st at 5 p.m. Central Time, our grants team will review for completion. So if you're missing a signature or missing a budget document, we'll be able to reach out to you for that information. This won't be any sort of like qualitative or substantive review, but rather it'll be a check that you indeed submitted everything that you need to actually be qualified for review for this grant application. So Wave 1, I would say, try and get your applications in Wave 1 for priority consideration and also just quicker responses. We are working to get these funds out as quickly as we can. But we also have a Wave 2, and the purpose of the Wave 2 is to give folks a chance who may not have learned about the grant program until later in Wave 1, and also so we can evaluate those preliminary awardees in Wave 1 and assess those against things like, are they serving covered populations around the state? What does the geographic dispersion look like? What does the project type dispersion look like? So Wave 2 is a chance for folks to apply and for our office to do additional outreach to make sure that the way this funding is dispersed is equitable at the end of the day. So Wave 2 applications are due on May 8th at 5 p.m. But if you want that early check, we ask that you submit by April 18th. So this will be rolling. So really, if you submit anytime after March 20th, you'll be considered in Wave 2. And then after we have our awardees, what we'll do is probably notify folks that they've been preliminarily selected, but then we do have to submit a list, a summary of these awardees to NTIA, the federal agency administering the dollars. Once we get approval, we can work with you all on grant agreements, and our hope is that this can all happen in summer 2025. Working to tighten up those processes as well to help make that a little bit more predictable. But as many of you might know, it can be kind of a long road with lots of steps. So we appreciate you working with us along the way. Two other flags here. We are hosting office hours Tuesdays at 11 a.m. and Fridays at 2 p.m. on WebEx throughout the duration of the application wave. A quick plug for our events page on the bottom here if you want to take a screenshot, or we can throw that in the chat. Thank you, Ling Ling. There is a calendar, and you can just click on the event on the day that you're looking at, and it'll be a WebEx link that prompts you to just join directly. So no registration required. Come with any of your questions, and we'll be excited to help. All right, so a little bit more about what this program is. Excuse me. The goal of IDEC is to empower and equip individuals and communities with the skills, resources, and confidence that they need to use the internet to fully participate in Illinois' modern society and economy. A couple areas of focus. First, we're looking for folks to address systemic barriers to digital equity. And second, to improve outcomes in health, education, economic stability, and quality of life. So quick example here. We'll look for you to support communities in helping them learn the skills to build a resume and apply for a job online, to access healthcare from home, to pay bills online, or to help family members with homework. An important piece of the Digital Equity Act is the requirement to prioritize service to covered populations. So covered populations are 8 populations defined by NTIA in the Digital Equity Act. And you can see these populations listed on the slide. Illinois has a lot of covered populations in our state. Exactly 80% of Illinoisans are part of at least one covered population. So really looking to spread these resources far and wide across the state. You'll see in the NOFO that you can kind of dig in on one covered population if you're a veterans organization, for example, and are very specific and focused. But we also encourage you to highlight in your application all of the covered populations that you intend to serve. There's sort of no limit, one to 8, and we're really excited to see how you serve those groups. So next we have a list of eligible project types. In the NOFO, you'll see that we have an application that asks you to tell us which project type you're focusing on. Note that you can include more than one project type in your application. So let's say that you're standing up a computer center, but also giving away devices. That's great. Just help us kind of work through which ones so we can categorize them accordingly as we're evaluating. So types of projects that are eligible. The first is digital literacy and skill building. This could be classes, workshops, coaching, or other learning opportunities to help covered populations build digital skills. Device distribution, any sort of giveaway of devices like laptops, tablets, computers, or other devices that address barriers faced by covered populations, such as certain telehealth devices or tools for folks with disabilities. Digital navigators, so folks can stand up or expand a program where they have trained members of the community who are designated to support covered populations in enrolling in high-speed internet, navigating tech challenges, accessing devices, and finding digital skill building opportunities. Computer center, this is an opportunity to stand up like a physical site where you have computers and internet and members of the community can come for support or just to use the computers. And local broadband planning. This one is probably a little bit different, and I would encourage you to join our webinar this coming Monday for more information here. But we're also excited to share resources for communities to create their own roadmaps for expanding broadband connectivity. So funding for local broadband planning would contribute to initiatives that perhaps you bring on a consulting firm or an engineer to conduct a survey of residents, to evaluate the infrastructure that's available in your community, do a request for information with internet service providers, and at the end of the day, align with an internet service provider who can come and build in your community to meet local needs, whether that's as small as in a housing authority community, an apartment community, or as large as a town, a city, a county. And I see lots of questions, so just know we'll get to those at the end. So funded initiatives must meet 4 requirements. First, they have to focus on covered populations and align with the goals in our digital equity plan. We're looking for initiatives that create long-lasting and meaningful change. We want to make sure that you have a measurable implementation strategy and you can kind of really clearly lay out the specifics of how you'll implement, when things will come to life, and how you'll measure your impacts. And we also look for you to involve stakeholders. So how will you make sure that you're involving stakeholder feedback, updates, incorporating that input on an ongoing basis to make sure that the program is effective and equitably implemented. Next 2 slides just touch on performance goals and measures. So the net takeaway here is that we will ask for quarterly reports from all grantees that reports out on different performance metrics. So these metrics will be more narrowly defined in your grant agreements based on the programs that you are implementing. But for an example, if you're standing up a device giveaway initiative, we'll want to know what is the total number of devices that you gave away? We'll want to know, how many covered populations did you serve in this quarter? How many people came to your digital skills classes? What sort of progress can you share in terms of pre and post surveys in terms of learning digital skills? So we'll have all of that kind of refined in your grant agreements and prepared with templates for you to report back to us. A couple more examples here that are in the NOFO, but we can keep moving. Next up is funding information. So this is set to be a 3-year initiative with a total funding amount of $13.5 million. We expect that awards will range from $30,000 to $300,000 per year on an annual basis for a 3-year term. You can adjust funding sources to vary year by year. You'll have a budget that you submit that kind of shows the spend year by year, so we can assess that. On this slide is also examples of funds use. So, for example, you can use the funds to implement digital inclusion activities that benefit covered populations, facilitate the adoption of broadband, implement training programs, make equipment available, update public access to computing, and lots more here. And I know there's questions, and so just know that we'll get to your questions and also send out these slides and the recording afterwards, so you can kind of mull over anything you need to offline. All right, so next, who can apply? The Notice of Funding Opportunity has a kind of comprehensive list of the eligible entities, which is also pasted on this slide. I would say essentially, as long as you are a nonprofit, non-private entity, we encourage you to apply. So this could be a local government agency, a community-based organization, an economic development organization, a library, a political subdivision, or any combination of those types of organizations. So if you are a for-profit business, you are not eligible. But if you are anything on the slide and you are nonprofit or public entity, you are eligible. All right. So we are not requiring any sort of cost sharing or match here. A match is basically if we had required an applicant to put forth some cash as a part of their application. So we are not requiring this or scoring it in any way. With that said, we are interested in sustainability. And so if you are working with a funder or you have a long-term plan to make sure this initiative is sustainable past the 3 years, we would love to hear about that in your application. And there's an opportunity to earn points around that sustainability plan. Indirect cost rate. So we do allow indirect costs here, and we request that all grantees request that indirect cost rate negotiation, or there's an opportunity to elect the de minimis rate to claim indirect costs. So this would be reflected on your budget application. And I got ahead of myself a little bit before when talking about the waves and the pre-reviews. So just to kind of reiterate here, there are 2 waves, and this is really to give folks more than one opportunity to apply and to give us a chance to do additional outreach where there does not seem to be as many applications, whether that's looking at a certain covered population that doesn't seem to be served by the existing pool. We might do additional outreach in wave 2 to garner that additional interest. Same thing with regions and areas around the state. We do want to make sure that as far as covered populations are disseminated around the state, funding should be kind of adequately dispersed to reflect those populations and those needs. So in our NOFO website, there is a couple of important pieces of information and documents. So you'll see the actual link to the NOFO. And then you'll see, if you scroll to the bottom, a handful of templates. So there's the grant application, which has a handful of questions that you'll answer in a fillable PDF that you'll save. There's a budget form, and then two mandatory conflict of interest and disclosure forms. So you'll kind of put together all of this with a cover letter, and then there's a form. It's on Smartsheet, just like any Google form, any form you've seen, where you'll fill in basic information about your organization, who you're planning to serve, where you're located, and you'll upload each of these files by the application deadline, which, as a reminder, is at 5 p.m. Quick snapshot. These are just two forms that you'll have to sign and fill out. Won't go into too much detail here. Great. On the next slide is a snapshot of the budget template. Oh, sorry, I got ahead of myself. Go ahead, one more slide. So we are working to be as transparent as we can about how we are evaluating your application. So if you flip back one slide, we'll show you the application review criteria. This is at the end of the notice of funding opportunity, but lays out exactly what we are evaluating applications for. So this includes community need, capacity of the eligible applicant, quality of the proposal and alignment to the state digital equity plan, support from the community, budget and plan for sustainability, and how many points folks can earn through each of these application categories. You go to the next slide. This is a snapshot of the budget template. And yeah, we can stay here and keep moving. So the budget template will allow you to input your plan, spend, and request for different budget categories. So a couple of things, examples of what you might consider. If you're standing up a digital literacy program, you might request funds for the cost of a curriculum, certifications, rent for space, barrier reducing costs for participants like travel reimbursements or food. You might need to print things, pay for supplies, things like that. Digital navigator programs might require paying personnel costs and fringe benefits, supplies like laptops, pens, paper, things like that. Local broadband planning might require a contract with an engineering or consulting firm. And to give you a quick overview of what merit review entails, we will have a group of merit reviewers who all sign conflict of interest disclosure forms and we'll score your applications. We'll have 3 scores per application, and the final score will be an average of those 3 scores. After we have the final scores, we'll organize them from highest to lowest score, and we'll look at geographic diversity and ensuring access across all covered populations. We'll also make sure to compare applications against those in their economic development region, so we're being more fair in those comparisons across the state. Anything that's not selected in wave 1 will carry over to wave 2 for evaluation. If we have time, we would love to give folks feedback on their applications, but that kind of depends on the timing. Funding information down the line, all of this will be in your grant agreement. So we'll essentially have an agreement with you on funding disbursement, your scope, expectations for the project, and reporting. This is a 3-year grant program, and so it will be a commitment for 3 years, but we will evaluate grantees on an annual basis to confirm that they're carrying out the work as expected. And so if there was any sort of issue, there is an opportunity to end that agreement early. Next slide shows some information on reporting. So our office collects quarterly reports, both performance, which is those metrics like number of devices distributed, for example, and financial reports where you'll share what you've spent and request reimbursement aligned to your budget that you submitted. Let's see. We have a requirement that folks may be visited by folks in our department. There is an annual audit requirement based on the dollar amount of your grant award. So lots of details here that will come into play should you be awarded. And finally, last 2 slides before I hand it over to my colleagues in the grants office. Digital Equity Act resources. So we know that this can be a lot, and Not everyone has staff to focus on grant applications and program building and all of these responsibilities. So we're doing our best to make it a little bit easier and have compiled resources on our website. So we have lots of webinars where you can watch the recordings, view the slides, but also look at resources here that talk about models for how to stand up a digital navigator program, data sources that you can use to pull together a really quality application and tell your story, examples of upskilling and training programs, curriculums. So please don't start from scratch. We'd also love to help make connections so you can talk to organizations who may be kind of experts in this work. So overall, communicate. We are here to support you. We have these twice weekly office hours and want to help you put forth your highest quality application. And finally, we will send this out over email. But so if you feel free to take a screenshot, but know it'll be in your inbox later. Lots of ways to get support and stay in the know. First, broadband at illinois.gov is the best place for questions. We monitor this account and can answer within the same day, usually. Our events page has the link to attend office hours, Tuesdays at 11, Fridays at 2 p.m., starting next week. We have 3 amazing community engagement managers who are organized by region, northern, central, and southern regions of the state. So if you're looking to do a presentation for your organization, your community, your county, please feel free to reach out to Alicia Lingling and Hillary to schedule that directly. They're driving all around the state and would love to come and visit you in your home location. We also have a newsletter and a LinkedIn page, which is a great way to kind of keep up to date on the latest and see spotlights of work funded to date. And of course, our website and helpful links. And with that, I will hand it over to Amber for part 2 of our conversation. And Amber, if we could try and end between like 45 and 50, so we have enough time for questions, that would be great.
Right, sounds good. Thanks, Devin. Hi, everyone. My name is Amber Broughton, and I am with the DCEO Office of Accountability. I'm a technical support manager. And in my part of the presentation, I'm going to be speaking in more general terms about GATA, the GATA grantee portal, pre-qualification, and other requirements that you need to be aware of. Next slide. All right, so I'll review the DCEO grant process. I'll talk about how to register in the GATA grantee portal. I'll talk about pre-qualification. I'll briefly touch on the notice of funding opportunity and then what to expect if you are awarded this grant. So this slide here talks about, it's the kind of big picture overview of the DCEO grant process. So it goes from pre-qualification all the way to the closeout of the grant. So pre-qualification. Those items need to be in good standing before you can apply for a grant. That's what you do first thing. You also have a fiscal and administrative assessment internal controls questionnaire, or ICQ, and that is done in the GATA grantee portal. It's due every state fiscal year. Once those pre-qualification items are in place, then it's time to submit your application documents. Like Devin said, those application documents are then reviewed by a merit review committee, and every applicant will receive notice from DCEO if they are awarded the grant that they applied for or not. So next I'll move on to the grant agreement. All applicants that are to be awarded the grant will receive a notice of state award, or NOSA, to accept in the GATA grantee portal. After that, your assigned DCEO grant manager will begin developing the grant agreement. And this is the document that lays out all project expectations and all grant requirements. So no surprises, it's going to be laid out for you in that grant agreement. The grantee reviews and signs the grant agreement. DCEO leadership reviews and signs the grant agreement, and then that grant agreement is considered executed. As the grantee begins implementing project objectives, periodic financial reports and periodic performance reports will be due to your DCEO grant manager. The grant manager and other DCEO staff reviews and accepts documents, or they may ask you for additional documentation. The grantee is then reimbursed for expenditures that are listed in those reports. Monitoring is needed for adherence to the terms and conditions of the grant agreement. Also want to note that annual audit reports are due in the GATA grantee portal. Then it's time for the closeout of the grant. The grant is closed or possibly extended once the grant period ends. Next slide. All right, so I've used this term GATA. That refers to the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act, which adopted federal grant guidance and regulations in 2 CFR Part 200. So we're taking the federal guidance and using them for state grants. This is to remove duplicative processes, increase accountability and transparency among all of the Illinois state agencies. We all use these GATA requirements. Next slide. All right. Then we've got the GATA grantee portal. This is our statewide grant management system. It's used for grant activity across all agencies. If you're brand new to the portal, you'll click that middle button that says Create Account. If you already have a portal account, then you click the grantee portal sign in. And we have the link on the screen and also in the chat. Next slide. All right. If you are brand new to the GATA grantee portal, I highly recommend checking out the GATA new user guide. This is one of those links that I recommend just bookmarking in case you need it. It's especially helpful for new portal users, but it can also be helpful for current portal users, or maybe you have new staff that will be working in the portal. It provides step-by-step instructions for registering in the portal, as well as kind of troubleshooting some items having to do with the portal. Also recommend checking out the Grant Accountability and Transparency Unit at the Governor's Office of Management and Budget. They are the statewide experts on all things GATA, all things grants. So they have a large collection of manuals, reference sheets, trainings on their website. So if you want to take a deeper dive into GATA, recommend checking that out. All right, pre-qualification. The state of Illinois has defined a set of requirements for all organizations seeking to receive grant funding. Pre-qualification demonstrates that you've met all the legal requirements and obtained all the necessary registrations. So you need to be in pre-qualified status. You need to be in good standing before applying for your grant. But you also will need to maintain that status throughout the life of your grant. When it's time for that grant agreement, you need to be in pre-qualified status. So this is an important one to go into the GATA grantee portal and check your pre-qualification status. Next slide. This is just an example, a screenshot of how your pre-qualification might look like in the GATA grantee portal. As you can see, this entity, they have 2 items in red. So those items, there is some sort of issue with that pre-qualification requirement, and they need to be addressed by you as the applicant, by you as the grantee. There is an item in yellow that is considered pending. Usually it's something being reviewed and will automatically update within a day or 2. So you don't need to worry about those yellow items. It's those red items that you want to address as soon as you can. Next slide. So I'll go through each of these items. A SAM.gov account. You need to have an active registration with the System of Award Management, or SAM.gov. It's a federal site and it needs to be validated annually. You'll receive a UEI number, and that UEI number is used in the state GATA grantee portal. I want to note that your registration should be set to public, not private. This is to help ensure that the federal site, sam.gov, can sync properly with the state site, the GATA grantee portal. Also want to note we often see entities when they are starting their sam.gov registration, they will receive that UEI number and then they will stop. There are more steps involved in a complete registration that is required for Illinois state grants, so please make sure that you complete the entire registration. And I want to note that the SAM.gov one in particular, it does take some time. So if you are brand new to SAM.gov, this is not one that you want to leave until the last minute. It can take, this federal site can take up to 2 weeks to have a complete registration, to verify your registration. So don't leave it till the last minute. Next up is the Federal Employer ID number, or FEIN. This is used to identify a business entity. If you don't already have one, the IRS provides them free of charge. After you receive it and you enter it into the GATA grantee portal, nothing additional that you need to do with that one. Next up is the Federal Excluded Parties list. This is a list that identifies entities excluded from receiving federal contracts, subcontracts, federal financial assistance. If you are on this list, it will automatically update for us. So nothing that you need to do with this. We will know right away if you are on this list and ineligible for state of Illinois funding. All right, need to obtain a certificate of good standing from the Illinois Secretary of State. This demonstrates that the entity exists and is in full compliance with state regulations. You can obtain the certificate of good standing at ilsos.gov, and we have that in the chat as well. The exception for this requirement is governmental entities. They are not required to obtain a certificate of good standing, but everyone else, all other entities, need to obtain that certificate. You cannot be on the Illinois Stop Payment list. If you are on this list, it means that an organization has fallen out of compliance. It's usually from a past grant. You're usually missing something like a past grant report or an audit. If you are on this list, it is likely something that can be reversed, usually with the submission of the missing item. If you do see that your entity is on this list, you can contact your former grant manager or your cognizant agency. You can contact us at DCEO at ceo.granthelp@illinois.gov, and we can help guide you through what the issue is and how to get you off the list. So another item that I definitely want to emphasize, you don't leave this one until the last minute. These sort of things take time to get yourself off of the list. Those audits, those sorts of things do take time. So be sure to go into the GATA grantee portal and check to make sure that you are not on this list. You also cannot be on the Illinois DHFS sanction list. If your entity is on this list, you have been in violation of an administrative rule, civil law, or criminal offense, and it will automatically update for us, so we will know right away if your entity is on this list. Couple of tips for the GATA grantee portal. Be sure to maintain a current and accurate contact list. You want to make sure that the right people at your organization have access to your entity's GATA grantee portal page and that the right people are receiving notifications. So you can do that from the main screen. You scroll down to grantee portal access and organization contacts and click that button that says manage. You also want to make sure that your fiscal year end date is accurate in the portal. That will come into play when it's time for audits. All right, Devin went over the Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO. This is the document that has all of the information that you will need for this particular grant. The outline is the same for every NOFO. It will always have the program description, funding information, who is eligible to apply, how to apply. It will have that link in there for you to upload your application documents, and more information about the administration, what to expect as a grantee, that sort of thing, and it'll have agency contacts in there. Next slide. How to find the NOFO. So when you are on our DCEO grantee opportunities page, if you click that apply for funding, you scroll down to your the grant that you are interested in, click on that link, and then the screenshot to the right, there's always a short summary at the top of the page. If you scroll down, that first link called NOFO Supplement, that is what we mean when we say NOFO. That is the NOFO PDF that will have all of the information for this particular grant opportunity. Just a couple of quick tips. Can't emphasize it enough that the Notice of Funding Opportunity contains all of the necessary information for this grant application. Many of the questions that I've seen in the chat, they are in the NOFO. So Please be sure to read that front to back. Know that that is where you will find that information. Any questions, you can, of course, notify the broadband team. They are the program contact. If you have any technical questions about the GATA grantee portal, you can email us at ceo.granthelp@illinois.gov. And that deadline, like Devin mentioned, is a hard deadline. 501, those grant applications are not going to be reviewed. Next slide. All right, Fiscal and Administrative Internal Controls Questionnaire. This is completed every state fiscal year in the GATA grantee portal. It is used to help mitigate risk and build grantee capacity. Just want to note that it is not used punitively and will not affect whether or not your entity will receive an award. Next slide. Post-award requirements. You're going to be working with your assigned DCEO grant manager, and you will be submitting periodic financial reports and periodic performance reports. The frequency varies, and the due dates will be outlined for you in your grant agreement. Please keep in mind that all grantees that have state expenditures during their fiscal year are required to submit a consolidated year-end financial statement and audit. You will upload those documents to the GATA grantee portal. Please keep in mind that there will likely be a cost associated with an audit, and you as the grantee, you are responsible for those expenses. This next slide just shows the different audit types and how that is determined. When you are in the GATA grantee portal, the first step in the audit process is called Step 1 Certification Form. It will ask you a series of questions to guide you through what type of audit is needed for your entity, but this table just kind of shows how that is determined. All right, next slide. You have many resources available to you as an applicant, as a grantee throughout the life of the grant. We have our DCEO grantee resource site. Highly recommend checking that out, especially the video training and resource library. We have many short video tutorials on many of the topics that I've talked about today. We have our grant training. So we have monthly pre-qualification trainings, as well as monthly trainings on revolving grant topics. We have weekly office hours every Tuesday from 2 to 3. Bring those GATA questions, and we're happy to answer them. You can also contact us, my team at ceo.granthelp@illinois.gov, and we can answer your questions as you are getting ready to apply for this grant. So I will pass it back over to Devin. Thank you.
Thank you, Amber. And I'll just reiterate that the GATA process can seem like a lot, but there are a ton of resources. So office hours, email addresses. I'm sure Amber and her team wouldn't mind walking someone through the process and answering your one-off question. So just know that there is support available for you. Okay, I know we have a ton of questions, so let's see what we can get through, and we'll go from there. I'm starting from the top here in the chat. So there's a question about federal grant dollars. Does the state have those dollars in hand? Are they pending? Could they be impacted by the executive orders? So I can share kind of like lay out the facts of where we're at right now. The state of Illinois has an award letter from NTIA, which is the agency that administers these dollars. So the award letter is a commitment from the federal government to the state that these dollars have been awarded to us, and we can spend them per the conditions outlined in that award letter. So we do have the dollar commitment. One variable here is that all sub-grantee resources, meaning anything that we allocate to organizations through this NOFO competitive process, are under what's called a special award condition, or a SAC, S-A-C, meaning that after we go through our competitive selection process through this NOFO, the state has to fill out a template kind of sharing, here's who we selected to get the funding, here's how it aligns to our award letter and our digital equity plan, and submit that to the federal government for approval before we can sign grant agreements and release those funds. So there are a handful of steps, and we will monitor any sort of changes. But the Digital Equity Act is a statute that was passed by Congress. And so for now, we are following that statute. Great. Next question. Is there any benefit to applying in wave one versus wave two? Given uncertainties and sort of the changing nature of our landscape right now, I think applying earlier is certainly a little bit safer in terms of just getting the funding out the door. You'll also get priority. So we will, I believe, save some funding for wave two. But I think you'll have the greatest chance of being the most competitive if your application has been submitted in wave one, so we can kind of compare you against that full pool. But that said, wave two, we will also be excited to review your application as well. Do incarcerated individuals include those recently released and the re-entry population? Yes. So if you read in our digital equity plan, we sort of expanded on that definition of incarcerated individuals to include returning residents and adjusted impacted folks. Does this grant include getting laptops to community members who do not have connectivity devices? It does indeed. Project types 1 and 3 seem very similar, digital literacy and digital navigators. So I can provide more guidance to distinguish them. First, I would point you to the notice of funding opportunity on page 3. There is requirements for each that kind of lay it out in more detail. I would say the main differentiator is digital skill building focuses on classes and learning opportunities. So you might be hosting workshops for several folks to help them learn or practice digital skills. Digital navigators is a more of a one-to-one relationship. So your expenses, instead of a curriculum or the cost of bringing a lot of people together for a class, might be more like paying and training one individual in your community who becomes that resident expert on, if someone comes to me and they have a question about what affordable internet options exist in my community, or I don't know what internet I need, or how can I find a laptop that meets my needs, or where can I find digital skills classes? The navigator is sort of that resident expert to help point members of the community to those resources. With that being said, if you were to combine the digital skill building type with digital navigators, the digital navigator could play a dual role in helping folks one-on-one find and connect to resources. They might also offer classes to the community. So they can certainly be combined, and it is okay that they're a little bit of an overlap there. The list of eligible project types, there's no preference. They're not ranked. I think we'll look for a variety, so no ranking there. They're all important. Are cell phones allowed? Based on our data and understanding of the device gap, cell phones are relatively prevalent around the state, and folks have kind of greater skills in using smartphones. So our priority is for other types of devices like laptops, tablets, or any device to help someone meet their digital equity goals. And this could be a screen reader, for example, or perhaps a medical device that helps someone utilize telehealth care services. So I would say that cell phones are not a part of the program. Is there any geographic preference? Our goal is to make sure that funds reach areas with the most need. And so there are covered populations all around the state. So, everywhere that can demonstrate that need and how a project meets the NOFO's goals and the digital equity plan will be preferred. We covered that one. Can the grant be used for online distance learning, ELA, ESL classes? That's a great question. So English language learners, English as a second language classes, I think as long as you can make the connection for us on how your project will increase the outcomes that we have laid out in the digital equity plan and increase digital skills. So that could look a lot of different ways. So we'll kind of put it on you to help lay it out for us on how those classes will help meet those goals. So we have a question about data and impact and kind of what are our expectations for grantees. So there's almost two different levels of data that we'll be collecting and measuring through this program to track our progress. The first is program level data, which is most relevant to grantees. So we'll ask you for information about your program, like how many devices have you distributed, how many people have you served, any sort of impact data showing learner progress. So learners came in at this level, but thanks to a survey or a quiz, they're now at this advanced level or this, medium level at the end of our program. So that's the kind of information that we'll collect from grantees. And then the state will take that information, put it together with inputs from a statewide survey, analysis of census data, analysis from other data sources to kind of on a macro level evaluate how we are progressing towards goals outlined in the digital equity plan. So you don't need to worry about telling us like how we're reducing the device gap on a statewide level. All we want to know is how you are contributing on your hyper local level, and then it'll be up to us to kind of build that into the broader puzzle of how we're progressing towards goals. In the application, do we just request for 1 year? No, you'll request for all 3 years. So do your best to kind of project out what you might anticipate needing for 3 years. Is there a specific number of awards that will be handed out? We don't have a specific number because there's such a wide range. We'll have to see how many applications we get requesting how much funding, and that will help us determine the number of awards. And we'll have to probably make tough decisions about, a smaller number of awards for a higher dollar number, a greater number of awards for less resources per award, or somewhere in between. In the case of portable devices, laptops, tablets, can grant dollars be spent on protective equipment like cases, etc., or strictly hardware? So I would say yes, as long as it's furthering those specific goals outlined in the NOFO and the expense is not on the sort of prohibited expenses list in the NOFO, should be acceptable. Will each year's funding require a renewal application? No, but we will be evaluating compliance and performance that first year to make sure that folks are performing as committed to in their grant agreement, so we can make the most use of these funds to make sure that they are having an impact in communities. And if there's a project that is, underperforming or hasn't been compliant, we'll likely have a conversation, but there is a potential for that program to not continue on to the next year. There's a question about indirect costs that I'm going to request, Taylor, that you maybe shoot me an email about so I can connect you with our grants team who will know more about this than I will. So if you email broadband@illinois.gov, you could get some more details there. What is considered on V off-campus for nonprofits? Marcella, I'm not sure what your question is referring to, so if you don't mind clarifying, happy to come back to it.
Hi, Devin. Is it okay if I clarify real quick?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Hi. Yeah. So this referred to the slide about the indirect cost rate and the difference in the indirect cost you can charge, and it said on versus off campus activity. So I was just wondering what that meant.
Yeah. That might have been referring to educational institutions like universities, but why don't you shoot an email to broadband@illinois.gov and I'll make sure that we get you the right answer in writing.
Okay, thanks so much.
Yeah. Okay. We got a question about using funds for food. So my understanding is that as long as it fits into the budget template, and it is not one of the prohibited costs outlined in the NOFO, and it's achieving the goals stated in the NOFO, it should be eligible. Is personnel costs an appropriate use of funding under the digital literacy and skill building? Yep, certainly in case you need to pay an instructor or someone to be like a project manager, that is certainly an eligible cost. How are funds distributed, bank transfer or reimbursement? I don't know if we have anyone. We might not have our grants team on here. So if you don't mind shooting an email to broadband@illinois.gov, we can share more. But it all goes through the comptroller's office. So you might be mailed a check or can set up direct deposit. And it is typically reimbursement. All right. Scrolling down here. We heard from a new nonprofit. Will my organization require a fiscal agent to support the grant, or can I apply on my own? As long as you are GATA pre-qualified and meet the eligibility criteria in the NOFO, a new nonprofit is welcome to apply. And I see that we're 2 minutes over. So Mike, perhaps we can go for another just few minutes to try and get through these questions. And folks, if you have to drop, feel free and we'll share the recording.
Yeah, absolutely fine.
Okay. All right. There was a mention of federal funds, federal agency administering the funds. Is this considered a federal grant or a state grant? That's a great question. The funding is federal, that comes to the state, but then the state is subgranting it out to subrecipients. And so it is a state administered grant program from your perspective. And it is up to us as the state to make sure that the program that we're administering externally aligns with federal requirements and the federal NOFO. So it's a little bit of both, but I would say from your perspective, it's a state grant program. We got a question about the performance goals and measures, measuring impact. And I think I covered this, but the question is kind of like, how are we determining impact on these broader outcomes? And so just to recap, we'll ask for more specific inputs from grantees on like number of people served, number of devices distributed, number of digital navigator programs. Then we'll take that data. We'll do a broader statewide analysis to determine the impact over time on jobs, healthcare, the overall digital divide and digital access. So that's not something that we would expect grantees to do. All right. If a grant partner, do we need to be registered in GATA? So yes, anyone who applies must complete the GATA pre-qualification process prior to applying, and this could disqualify you. So definitely a priority. Can the cost of an audit be included as a direct or indirect cost in the grant budget? Bruce, I might ask you shoot an email to broadband@illinois.gov to make sure I can get the right answer for you on that one. We got some kind words about our communications and organization, so thank you, Miriam, and thank you, Marva. Our office has been working really hard, so really shout out to the full team who's been putting in a lot of hours to make this program as great and easily accessible as we can. All right, scrolling down here. Will we need to collect identifiable information of each individual served? No. So we do not want personally identifiable information. We will only ask for information in aggregate. So we might ask for the count of different members of covered populations or the percentages. I think based on federal guidance and what's happening, we'll work with you to make sure that we're keeping folks and data safe throughout all of this. So that is top of mind for us as well. And I know there's some questions about the NOFO and kind of the impact metrics. We do apologize if that was misleading in any way. I would say the final metrics that you'll be expected to collect will be in your grant agreement, and we are formulating those based on the project type. So happy to have a further conversation about that, but you're not expected to report on statewide outcomes, more share with us inputs that can help us measure overall impact of this program so we can then advocate for more funding or kind of see what's working, what's not working along the way. Will there be a pool of digital speakers or educators available for workshops? Let's see, where can we find digital teachers or people with digital knowledge who are willing to teach, present workshops in a community setting, especially if we are in a rural community? Great question, Rose. We have a pretty robust and growing community of digital inclusion, digital equity practitioners in the field. And so I would encourage you to join our monthly digital equity updates calls. Our next one is actually today at 1 o'clock. And so if someone from the IOB team is able to put that link in the chat to register for today, that's a great space to connect with folks and find resources. We'll also share out a link of resources online, and it sounds like it just could be helpful to have a conversation. So Rose, if you want to email broadband@illinois.gov, we can connect you with one of our community engagement managers to help workshop your ideas and maybe make some connections. If an application can't be funded at the rate requested, will the proposed grantee be offered funding at a lower rate? Yes. So this has happened in past grant programs as well. It's very likely that we won't be able to fund your application at the full amount requested. Just to manage expectations, I think we're going to get a lot of interest, which is great. So we will essentially come back to you with what we're able to fund it at, and you'll have the option to accept or not accept that. And your scope would, of course, be reduced to something that could be manageable with that dollar amount. Can you purchase software like Canvas, Coursera, Salesforce for the digital literacy skill building project? Yes, definitely. That would probably be under supplies, but you could look at the budget and see. Yep, we have an FAQ. We usually post it within a few days, but we will send that link out after. So we want to make sure everyone gets the same information. So we'll have all Q&As posted online within the next couple of days. Okay, I think we made it through all the questions. We lost some folks along the way, but I will close this out there. And just a huge shout out to all of you for your interest and coming along for the ride. We're so excited to have reached this point, and huge shout out to the Illinois Broadband team for all of their work to get us here. Okay, thank you, Mike. Feel free to close us out.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Have a great weekend.
Thank you all very much.